All right, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming back. I know it was difficult to drag yourself away from those lovely croissants. So I'm Steve Franks. I work in the partner team here at Dataiku, and it's my pleasure today to introduce another Steve and a Jackie who are going to join me on stage now. So a round of applause, please. All right, fantastic. So maybe just a quick introduction for yourselves there, starting with you, Steve.
Is my microphone working? Yeah, I think so. Good. So my name's Steve Perry. I'm head of delivery for Convex. So Convex is an insurance company. We do specialized insurance. So oil rigs, things that are really expensive, penguins in Dubai, that sort of stuff.
And Jackie?
Cool. Hey guys, nice to meet you. I'm Jackie Choi. I lead our AI BI partnership at Snowflake. Prior to Snowflake, I used to be a solutions engineer, which basically meant I helped companies sort of make sense of various tech stacks they have. Now I get to build partnerships to make things work a bit smoother. Good to be here.
Fantastic, thank you both. So we talked a lot today and this morning already about agents and Gen AI, but we're going to ground it in a more traditional industry right now, the insurance industry. So my wife's an underwriter. Still a lot of that is done on paper. You know, Excel is kind of like the future for some folks like that. So Steve, maybe you can just talk a little bit about that initial journey with Dataiku. You know, how do you modernize a kind of more conservative industry like yours?
So it started out with a desire to eliminate all spreadsheets from Convex. Of course, that was a fool's errand, but we had good reasons to try and do so. So spreadsheets ultimately facilitate human processes. But they are quite difficult for a number of reasons, as I'm sure most people in this room will know. It takes time to populate spreadsheets with data. You've got to spend time checking that data. These are manual processes. And then once that process is complete and the data is in the spreadsheet, it stays in that spreadsheet and it never goes anywhere else. And it stays on someone's computer. If you're really lucky, it gets lost in SharePoint. So we realized that at the heart of our processes were spreadsheets, and the biggest time sink for our processes was those spreadsheets and working with those spreadsheets. So we brought Dataiku in really with a view to kind of have a better way of dealing with spreadsheet data. And what we were aiming for is something that would be a middle ground between the subject matter experts who would use those spreadsheets and technical engineers who would be able to build scalable, reliable processes on top of Dataiku. And that's what we've ended up with.
Oh, fantastic. And maybe as you went on that journey with Dataiku, you know, maybe you can give some examples of where you see the real value being added by that, by adding a platform such as ours.
So I was talking about this earlier, actually, with someone from Experian. So there's lots of success stories, but there's two really big success stories. So in insurance, we do something called reserving, which is effectively just to make sure that we've got enough money to pay out claims that we're likely to have. It's a really, really big, complicated process. All insurance companies do it. For many insurance companies, it is a massive time hole. So it takes months and months to do it. They usually do it 3 or 4 times a year, and it sucks up a huge amount of resources. Actuaries are at the core of the reserving process, and actuaries are really well paid for good reason, but they make a quite an expensive resource. So the challenge that we set ourselves, and this was about 3 years ago, was could we remain static with the number of actuarial heads that we had while we grew the size of the business? So we had quite ambitious growth plans, and we wanted to keep our headcount static. And to do that, we automated our reserving process, and at the heart of that was removing spreadsheets from that process. So everywhere we found a spreadsheet, we replaced it with a Dataiku process and workflow, and then we tied it all together in an orchestration process, which the actuaries now interface with. So that was a really, really good example because we were successful on 2 fronts. First of all, the time it takes us to do our reserving has dropped massively. So if we wanted to, we don't, but if we wanted to, we could do our reserving process each and every day. And we've managed to stay static to that headcount. And that was a really good example of having tangible return on investment. We set out with our hypothesis and says we've got 15 odd actuaries now, and in 3 years' time, when we're double the size of the company's doubled in size, we'll still have 15 actuaries, and more or less we do. Another really good example is in our financial processes. So again, as an insurance company, the speed at which we can close our books impacts the speed at which we can pay people and pay claims and things like that, which makes us a better insurer. And the average across insurance companies, I think, is between 12 and 15 days. We can close our books in 5 days, which means we get claims out to people faster. And again, we've taken the same approach. We've targeted spreadsheets. We had a big, long kill list. I think we had about 75 different spreadsheets and Airtables. And we systematically worked through all of those spreadsheets and Airtables, and we replaced them with either automated processes that fully ran through Snowflake using DBT models, or where we needed human interaction, we have Dataiku models that allow humans to interact with that data, but then still store that data consistently and process it much faster than we did before.
Fantastic. I hadn't realized, Steve, that actuaries were paid so well. So any actuaries in today? No?
It's got to be
fantastic. Drinks on those guys a little later. Fantastic. Jackie, turning to you. I mean, Snowflake is part of the landscape now at Convex, and we have a lot of joint customers together. Maybe from your side of kind of the partnership, how do you see that relationship with Dataiku?
Yeah. I'm going to take a quick step back and just get a feel for the audience. Is everybody kind of familiar with Snowflake and what it does? Can we do a show of hand? Okay, it's a good crowd. For those of you who haven't heard of Snowflake, we are a fully managed cloud-based data platform that's transforming how businesses store, manage, analyze their data at scale. And we're actually not doing this alone. We have partners like Dataiku. We have over 12,000 partners, many of who are actually our customers. So broadly speaking, those partners split into 3 categories. One of them is ISVs, partners like Dataiku, who extend the Snowflake capabilities with innovative solutions like AI, ML, analytics. We also have system integrators who really help customers deliver Snowflake for our customers. And lastly, the hyperscalers, where we have really deep technology and go-to-market alliances with. So going back to your question of the Dataiku and our partnership, how it fits into our ecosystem, it really is a perfect tag team, if you ask me, because we're essentially bringing Snowflake's data platform with Dataiku's AI ML capabilities. In simplest terms, teams will prepare, analyze their data all on Snowflake, and then do things like deploy AI ML models really quickly with Dataiku, not like 3 months later after everyone's forgotten about the question they were asking AI. So in a nutshell, I would say it's not just about a partnership of technology. It's really about bringing AI and analytics in a practical, impactful, and fast way, all in a kind of governed umbrella of Snowflake platform.
Fantastic, thank you. Steve, we love a nice metric and KPI, particularly in the insurance world. So maybe once you got Snowflake in there as well as Dataiku, which obviously you've been using for quite a long time, where did you see that big uptick by bringing that kind of power of 3 together?
So you've set me up nicely for it with the time to insight piece. So of course, the biggest problem with spreadsheets is not anything I said a few minutes ago. It's the fact that people love them. Everyone loves the spreadsheet. Everybody likes working with spreadsheets. So to make our removal process of spreadsheets possible, we had to give people something that was better than a spreadsheet. Now, Dataiku is not a spreadsheet, but it offers many of the same capabilities that you can do in a spreadsheet, and so much more beyond that. And what we were able to give to quite a few people in Convex, we have quite a few licenses across Convex, is the ability to use Dataiku, which is a low-code platform to create new insights on top of things and actually go beyond what you're able to do in a spreadsheet. So for us, what we were able to see in the metric that we observed is by giving this tool to people and also giving them clear access to the data within Snowflake, which is a really good way for us of organizing that data and presenting it back to the consumers. We're able to present them the opportunity to create new insights, have those insights validated, and provide value much faster. So the time to insight for us using Dataiku has fallen dramatically.
Fantastic. And so we've got the foundations built there. Convex are big users of advanced govern. So maybe I can ask you a little bit about, what you did before you had Dataiku govern, and how you see that different now that you've implemented advanced govern.
Yeah. So The ability to trust data is the most important part. Anyone can get a number that says something and says the thing they want it to say, but whether or not you trust it depends on how much it's used. And as I mentioned before, some of our key processes in Dataiku are really, really core to what we do in Convex. For an insurance company to not have their reserving data ready on time, that's a big problem. So these are things that not just have to be fast, but they have to be reliable, and they have to be assets that can be trusted by Convex. So in our journey using Dataiku, we started off with a team of people that we refer to as the Center of Excellence. And these guys were our engineers, they were similar to a change control board, which we didn't like because we don't like the concept of change control board, but they were there to manage the chaos. They were there to kind of like be the arbiters of this thing is ready for production, this thing can be trusted versus you have done this thing in 30 seconds, and yes, it works, but no one should trust what it says. So they were the arbiters of truth when it came to that, which worked well for a time, but obviously wasn't particularly scalable. And we started looking at Advanced Govern a couple of years ago. And what Advanced Govern allows us to do now is it allows us to work through our deployment process and take something from an experiment, which is where everything in Dataiku starts, very, very quickly, easily and predictably through to something that exists in production and can be trusted and relied upon by Convex. That process is fully automated. All of the steps are automated, and we don't have a change control board anymore. When you start a project, you can run it as an experiment, and when you're ready to move it to something more than an experiment, you move it into that govern node process. As part of that, you say, who is the business person who is accountable for this? So if it's something to do with reserving, that would be one of our actuarial team. And they're able to take full accountability of what happens with that as it moves through the stages. So if you've got a large team of people working on different projects, you're able to distribute that accountability and autonomously run the governance of your different processes and let the experts decide what is and isn't acceptable from a governance perspective. And you can remove all the technology people from it.
Wonderful, thank you. So we've talked a lot about the foundations, building that up, advanced govern. Maybe Jackie, I'll turn to you now. We're contractually obliged to talk about Gen AI and agents and mention it at least 3 times in every session. We've talked about the foundations in a more traditional industry, but maybe you can talk just for a little bit, just to help us close out there, talk about Cortex and the AI strategy at Snowflake and how you see that working alongside Dataiku.
Yeah. I would say, I think it's really timely that we're talking about the overall Snowflake AI Cortex strategy and how the partnership fits in. Because ultimately, what we're trying to do at Snowflake is make AI less like rocket science, but more like part of your everyday workflow. So if you think of Snowflake as the powerhouse where all your data lives, scales, and stays secure, we add Cortex, which is Snowflake's in-house AI ML layer. So we bring AI to that data. And then add Dataiku into the mix, then it's the workbench where a team can build, test, deploy AI projects, all in the single kind of platform without the risk of moving your data or compromising your governance. I think that's essentially kind of how I see we're marrying the two joint value together, and that's going in the direction of where we're headed from AI ML perspective.
Yeah, and it's that ability to use those Cortex services and functions directly from Dataiku. It's really, really helpful. And Steve, turning to you as well. Again, we've talked about how important it is in your industry to build those foundations correctly first. Sort the let's say the less sexy stuff. Kind of getting rid of spreadsheets and so forth, but looking more towards the future and where you see that going. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I challenge that getting rid of spreadsheets isn't sexy. I think
okay. Well, there we go. Yeah, we could take a poll afterwards.
But I think a really good way of describing it. So the theme of this is from chaos to control. When we were talking about what we were going to speak about on stage today, we were saying, what are the agentic use cases that Convex is doing that we could talk about? And I was there saying, well, we've got a few things in experiments. I don't think there's really anything suitable. And our customer services manager said, well, what about your claims approver experiment? And I was like, oh yeah, maybe. And in the back of my head, I was like, what the hell is that? I have no idea what they're talking about. So I messaged some of our team, and I was like, what is this claims approver experiment? And the testament for me was that one of the engineers replied with a link, and the link was to the govern node. Clicked on the link, took me to the govern node, and it explains the purpose, the objective, who was part of that experiment, where the data was coming from in Snowflake, the value that we were expecting to create, who was signing it off, and I was able to see at the different stages of that. If anyone's interested in that afterwards, I'm quite happy to show people at a break, because it's quite a good example of how it all works together. And that experiment itself, again, it feeds in nicely to what we were talking about earlier from an agentic perspective. We have a robotic process automation at the moment that allows us to approve experiments if they meet approve claims if they meet certain conditions. So something comes in, it's below a certain value, it meets the following conditions, we just approve it, and we think nothing more of it. We are taking that approach and applying the agentic element to that. So rather than us defining those conditions up front and doing all the research to say what conditions do we have to meet for a claim to be approved, we're able to let an agent make those decisions on our behalf. And where we are at the moment, we've got a nice way of understanding where that agent is relative to our current process. So we're able to compare the two.
Fantastic. You see, and you said you weren't going to talk about it, and you said agent at least 10 times there, so I'm kind of pleased with that. Well, our little sign there is flashing, and we got a minus sign there, so it only remains for me to say thank you very much. Jackie, thank you very much, Steve. So a round of applause for these guys.